Hello and welcome back to I Can Murder a Podcast. I'm Tom and I'm joined, of course I'm with him, it's Ben.
Love how it's gone from my good pal to my pal to now it's Ben.
I can kind of tolerate him still. It's Ben.
It's good to see you, mate.
Yeah.
How's the hangover?
The hangover?
It was my birthday weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't actually have a hangover.
You sorted everything out for me. What a guy this guy is.
You put it on me to do it and then you told me exactly who to invite, where to go, and then you left the WhatsApp group because you said it was a surprise party. Wasn't a surprise party.
Well,
You organised your own surprise birthday party and put it on me.
some people weren't there, which was a surprise. Speaking of caring and speaking of saying thank yous, thank you, Tom, for sorting my birthday weekend out. It was a great day. Yayan did a few... Yayan, Welsh, that'll be a running theme.
I don't think he wants to be associated with this case whatsoever.
Whether he likes it or not, he has some sort of attachment to this case. Not physically, that wouldn't...
Or mentally.
No, but spiritually maybe.
Not spiritually.
Emotionally.
I just want to say our friend Ryan has nothing to do with this case. He won't be going to your surprise birthday next year after all that.
So speaking of massive thank yous, a massive thank you to literally everybody tuning in right now, whether it's visually or auditorily. That's not a word. Who's joining via the ears?
The ears.
The ears.
So when we started, we always thought about the visual aspect of this rather than the audio, but we've been overwhelmed by the downloads. We've just hit 1,000 downloads, which in the first month is amazing.
Yeah, and I think to pull back the magician's curtain or to look up the wizard's sleeve.
Look up the wizard's sleeve. How can you make everything sound creepy and crude?
People are interested. So for some context, we approached this project by filming the first 3 episodes kind of in a batch, and we weren't able to, it was about a month before we actually released them that we were able to then obviously get the feedback that you guys have been giving. We didn't know that there'd be as many people joining us via audio. So to those guys, a massive thank you. I don't know why I'm looking straight into the camera while I'm speaking to them. But we've had feedback from all over the world. We've hit 1,000 YouTube subscribers, which is insane.
Yeah, we're nearly at 2,000, which is amazing.
Yeah, 1,000 followers on our Instagram. So Tom puts together some really cool images.
It's just what I do.
It's what he does.
What about Twitter?
We're not so strong.
Who looks after Twitter?
I look after all of them.
Do you look after Twitter? Well, we're going to make more effort on Twitter.
But we wanted to say a massive thank you anyway for us to get this kind of feedback 4 weeks in. And we only got to start getting the feedback, when the first episode came out. So we'd been waiting a while. It had been filmed.
Well, I think we had little targets we mentioned when we first started, and we've far exceeded anything we kind of thought would be possible by this point. So we really appreciate the support. Any recommendations people have said, and kind of people getting involved with the kind of little in-jokes we've got that's really fun to see.
There's a lot of ocean life going on, and we appreciate people spotting that, clocking that. We've also obviously got a few little hidden Easter eggs, which some people have got. If not, pop back and have another look. You might see something that surprises you. But no, I think for us, we just wanted to say a massive thank you. If you're listening, if you're watching, if you're doing a bit of both, then we really appreciate that.
So from going from this cheeriness, we're going to move on to this week's case, which is very tough. I want to say a little warning before we get into it. What we're covering Ian Watkins from Lostprophets. He's not a murderer, but we said from the very beginning we're going to cover different cases. It's not always going to cover a serial killer or a murderer. And Ian Watkins, so people who are... This is going to get very dark, this case, and might be a bit upsetting for some people listening.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I mean, in researching the case, I think this has been the most upsetting and kind of disgusting preparations we've done. So I think it's fair to give a bit of a warning in advance. It's quite graphic. We're going to choose to kind of tread a bit of a fine line in some of the graphic information that is.
Yeah, we're not going to go really in depth on exactly what happened in the situations. If you want to get that kind of stuff, it's all written down in the transcript from the court, which I wouldn't recommend you read. No. The reason we chose this case was me and Ben, as we've mentioned before, we used to be in bands together around about this kind of time. Lostprophets were very much at their prime, and we also felt like this case we hadn't seen much online that had covered it.
Yeah, I think so in the build-up, obviously we'll look into what other documentaries, podcasts, articles, blogs, and with Watkins, there's journals. Yeah, we uncover a few journals in our prep. But with Watkins, apart from the BBC website, it was hard to come by anyone that's kind of extensively looked into the case. So that's partly why we wanted to cover it. Partly, I feel, as disgusting and horrible and upsetting as this case is, if you don't shine some form of light on it, sometimes it's easy to forget that things like this have actually happened.
Yeah, well, as you say, like shining a light on it. When we were researching this, you kind of not forgotten this has happened, but you think of someone how big he was at one time, and he literally has done some of the most
inhumane
things ever. And it feels like, not that everyone should be talking about this all the time, but it just feels like something I hadn't really heard or thought about for a while. So yeah, it was a very tricky one to kind of go into, and
Well, I cooked up the notion that some of the most evil serial killers in the world would turn their nose up at what Watkins did.
Even though he never took a life, not from his own hands. I mean, who knows what the repercussions were of these acts going forward. But yeah, I think you're completely right. He's crossed a lot of lines which some sadistic people would never think to cross.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. So should we jump into it?
Yeah, can you set the scene, Ben?
Okay. It's mid-2012. A trend set this side of the millennium continues to thrive. Rock, punk, and metal bands continue to push, barge, and charge their way into the top music charts all over the world. Charts of which, more traditionally, are dominated by more popular varieties the industry has to offer. Linkin Park, Sum 41, Limp Bizkit, Blink-182, and many others continue to vie for their place at the top. With this, more eyes than ever are on your band, Lostprophets, a 6-piece alternative rock group from South Wales that have taken the world by storm. Your band are currently celebrating the release of your 5th studio album, Weapons. Years and years of touring the Valley's music circuit, headlining shows, tours and festivals the world over, as well as relentless days and nights on the road all around the world are culminating to this precise moment as you realise that you've well and truly made your mark in the history books. You wake up, dry mouth, beating heart, a phone full of missed calls, voicemails and text messages. This can't be real. You turn the TV on, jump online, switch the radio on, all as quickly as possible. This can't be real. The headlines blind and burn. None of the information can be absorbed.
Lostprophets has pleaded guilty to a string of sex offences.
This can't be real. Unfathomable. 15 years of your life is now down the drain. Your friend, your family, your leader, a man that once held your children in his hands, Ian Watkins. Everywhere, ingrained, unavoidable, unforgivable. From the stage to the cage. This can't be real.
So thanks for that, Ben. I think it really kind of paints the picture of how surreal it must have been to be a bandmate, and how, all your life's work has just gone down the drain in what seems like an instant. Just want to say a quick thanks to Phil Witten for the animation there of Ian Watkins. He's done all our artwork, our animation at the beginning. He's a top artist. Give him a follow on Instagram.
Right off the bat, for those of you who are kind of listening or viewing right now and wondering, who is Ian Watkins? Because that's understandable. He was the lead singer and frontman of a band called Lostprophets during the 2000s and kind of early part of the 2010s. They achieved quite a bit of fame. They technically, did they or didn't they break America? They were in the process of doing so.
They did a lot of the Warped Tours and things like that.
Yeah, headline act in most cases. They did some pretty big festivals globally. Reading and Leeds, obviously, they were fairly high up on the bill. So they were almost at their peak when what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I saw them at Reading one year. Yeah, there were lots of people watching them. Yeah, so they did reach, especially over here, they were very, very big.
Very much a main stage act.
Yeah, 100%.
Got a lot of time on Radio 1 as well, which was kind of in the early days of when they started playing a bit more rock and metal alternative music. So he's the lead singer of Lostprophets, just to give you a little bit of context, but we will crack on. So Ian David Carslake Watkins was born on 30th of July, 1977. I'm going to give this a go. Merthyr Tydfil.
Merthyr Tydfil sounds like a...
Merthyr Tydfil.
I was going to say, sounds like a baker in a Roald Dahl book.
It's as if I knew you were going to say that when I did the...
Nah, No.
He later moved to Pontypridd, where he attended Hawthorne High School with future Lostprophets bandmate Mike Lewis.
So whenever I hear the Hawthorne High School, I just think of Hawthorne Heights.
So looking at his childhood, there's nothing really out of the ordinary that strikes you as kind of a warning sign or anything like that, like a lot of the other cases we've covered. He was well raised. He was said to be a happy child, happy teenager. Obviously, a happy teenager starts this kind of emo alt rock band, and you know, he had no clear warning signs or kind of alarm bells during his childhood or teenage years, which makes this all the more challenging to deal with when we talk about what then goes on to happen.
He was charming. He was charismatic. He was very into his graphic design. And
went on to get first class honours.
Yeah, so he must be very studious. I mean, the only thing I'll say is odd, which isn't odd, but he was straight edge, which you know which is a big thing in the scene as well, like people being straight edge. Yeah, crossing the hand, which basically means you don't take drugs, you don't drink, which
for a frontman at the time was fairly rare.
Yeah, I mean, so that was the only thing that would be like slightly like, oh, it's more like, not like anything that's like, oh, this will lead to this. But
so he attends high school, meets Mike, and they go on to form. There's a few bands that they go through before they actually then assemble the Lostprophets. I can give you a few guesses for the first band, Tom.
Give me a few guesses.
I'll give you one guess.
Okay, Lostprophets. I'm in suspense, Ben. Reveal to me what the band name was called.
They were originally called...
Stop doing that.
Sounds awful, doesn't it?
It sounds horrible for everyone.
The Bum Mules.
The Bum Mules?
Bum Mules. No. So there you go. There you have it.
I wouldn't see them play.
So in Ian's teenage years, he goes through many different bands, many different genres. He's in the Bum Mules, obviously, as we've discussed. He was also in a band called Aftermath, who were a thrash metal band that were formed in 1991 in a shed in Watkins Garden.
I mean, we've had some terrible band names in the past. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not going to look too down on him for this stuff. I'll look at other stuff he does, obviously, I think he's scum. But we've all had bad band names.
Yeah, absolutely. Clueless Commotion.
There's one that you tried to make us have. We'd never had it, though.
Humble.
Humble.
No, that's not the band name. Clueless Commotion is quite humble.
It's just forgettable. What's that Clueless Commotion? And no one's ever said that as a phrase. Oh God, what's that noise? What's that Clueless Commotion going on out there? What? They're on the main stage. Let's go. I think Bum Mule are supporting.
Yeah. So as well as the Bum Mules, there's also Fleshbind and Public Disturbance. Now in 1997, Lostprophets are formed. And Ian launches this with his friend Mike, and they are the first of what then goes on to be known as the South Wales Valleys wave of alternate rock. So there's a lot of big other bands that came out of that. Attack, another big one that we were both massive fans of at the time. Kids in Glass Houses.
Yeah, great band.
Still are a big fan, actually.
The Blackout.
The Blackout, yeah. So there was a fairly big scene there at the time.
Funeral from a Friend are Welsh, but maybe not from the Valleys then.
So Lostprophets are then touring extensively throughout the UK, and they're gaining quite a bit of attention as they're doing this. It's noted that Ian is quite a charismatic frontman. He's also got quite a unique voice, described as very melodic, but also at the same time he can hit quite an aggressive screamy tones alongside that.
So during this time in that scene, the big publishers, the big magazines were Kerrang and Metal Hammer, and they were getting a lot of attention from these magazines, Lostprophets, which really kind of cemented them within the scene and really showed that they were one to look out for.
Yeah, and it's then a couple of years after they started, they released The Fake Sound of Progress in 2000, which is absolutely blows up around the world. And they are now kind of, headlining circuit festivals. They're touring extensively. They're in the charts. And this is Watkins' first real taste of success and almost overnight fame.
Well, it seemed to be he gravitated towards being a front man. He loved the attention of it. He loved, the fans coming up to him, talking to him about it. And he seemed very pleasant and, he seemed to really enjoy it. He was sober, he said straight edge. So he wasn't, a mess. He was able to talk to people and really take it in. And it seemed to be he's found his calling. He's found what he wants to do. Yeah,
because he could also play guitar and drums, but obviously found his feet as a front man. So they blow up. They're touring, not only the UK now, they're touring Europe, they're touring Asia, they're touring America. They release a few more albums, and at this point now, they're really established as one of the biggest bands in the UK, and certainly, one of the biggest bands to come out of Wales. With this, obviously, the air of celebrity, catches up with Ian. He has a couple of celebrity girlfriends at the time as well, notably Fern Cotton and Alexa Chung.
Yeah, Fern Cotton from Smile fame and Radio 1 presenter, and Alexa Chung from Channel 4. She presented on Channel 4, and now she's quite into the fashion world. Still presents occasionally. And she's going out with Alex Turner from Arctic Monkeys, or she was. I'll find out.
It's a good bit of Chung knowledge there from you.
Oh, they split up in April, so there you go. So I wasn't too far off.
So from kind of the year 2000 to the year 2010, Lostprophets and Watkins are on top of the world. That decade for them was massive, but there appears to be, quite a lot going on behind the scenes and behind closed doors.
So as I mentioned earlier, the only thing that I kind of thought was a bit strange was a Rockstar, being straight edge. He did get into drugs as he progressed and got a bit more famous. He started on coke and got really into ecstasy. And then it progressed quite in depth, and he got all the way to crystal meth whilst he was in LA, which, he's not just kind of party drugs, it's gone to the next level.
Yeah, and I mean, the theme of drugs is something that will stick with Watkins now, as we go through the next few years. It's a repeated theme, unfortunately, and it gets even worse.
Definitely, and a lot of his friends actually describe him as being a junkie, so it kind of shows it's not just every now and then, it's something that he's like waking up and he needs.
He's got a dependency.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. It's claimed by friends of Watkins that he never showered and that his apartment was an absolute state, and he was always on something.
So you have to think the journey from a first-class honours degree in graphic design, straight edge, all the way to here, being in LA, recording rock albums and being absolutely off your face on crystal meth. It's that from that is crazy, and sadly it gets a lot worse.
So we always find it quite useful to kind of break things down into a bit of a timeline so you can see the exact details emerge as and when they did. Now, as I think this is important to mention, as Lostprophets are finding, massive levels of fame and Watkins is touring the globe, going back as far as 2008, allegations had been made regarding Watkins that never came to light. So we're going to break down a bit of a timeline for you guys and kind of explain exactly the what's, where's and when's. Now, we'll also be sure not to go into as much graphic detail as there is, as Tom mentioned, it is available online. I don't recommend checking it out whatsoever, but it is out there.
So a name that's going to feature a lot in this is Joanne Majelix. She was an ex-soldier. She was a big fan of Lostprophets, and at the time she was a sex worker. She had a lot of encounters with Ian Watkins, and she's going to feature a lot in this. Just to explain, that's who she is.
Yeah, she's a very involved figure, very involved name throughout the whole process. I mean, it spans, almost 10 years, and she almost single-handedly enables Watkins to eventually be brought to justice.
She's quite a polarizing figure, because some people think that there's something not right about how she behaved, but we'll get into that and we can discuss that.
December 29th, 2008, Joanne Majelix first reports Lostprophets frontman Ian Watkins to Pontypridd Child Services for inappropriate conduct with a child. Watkins had informed her of a number of 14-year-old fans he'd abused and taken the virginity of. He had also been telling Joanne that he wanted to get her pregnant for the sole purpose of abusing their baby.
On the 31st of December 2008, so New Year's Eve, Rhondda Children's Services received the handwritten letter of complaint from Miss Majelix, also reporting Watkins for inappropriate conduct with a child.
On the 8th of January 2009, meetings are held to discuss the Watkins allegations, and a police investigation is launched.
On the 28th of March 2009, Miss Majelix is interviewed by the West Yorkshire Police. No further action is taken.
On the 1st of June 2009, an investigation is officially closed by the South Wales Police. No further action is taken.
So even now, there's so many different police forces being informed.
Yeah. I mean, it spans a few different regions as well, and 2 different countries, of course.
Yeah. So I mean,
And it's very quick as well for them to decide no further action to be taken. I mean, some of the reports that we read claimed that it would impact Watkins' career.
Yeah.
And that he was over in LA, so it's LA's problem.
On the 4th of October 2010, the Met Police were informed by some disturbing comments Ian Watkins made, but no further action was taken.
On the 29th of May 2011, Miss Magellic's, Joanne, sent an email to the ACPO, which is the Association of the Chief of Police Officers. So she's going up to, escalating this now to a new level, claiming that Watkins had raped a young child. Again, no further action is taken.
So during this time, Joanne, she was kind of thinking, because Ian was, dabbling in drugs at this stage, that maybe, because the police weren't listening to her, she was starting to question whether or not, maybe it was just coke talk, maybe he was just being weird or trying to be funny, and maybe she was starting to question herself, thinking that maybe it's her own kind of problems, and Ian, maybe he is innocent, because surely if he wasn't, the police would actually be doing something about it.
Yeah, and I mean, this is 3 years after her first initial complaint about Watkins. So, a lot of time has passed, and obviously they've achieved a new level of fame and broke America. So she's kind of doing a lot of soul searching herself.
But I also think Ian Watkins must be playing with fire, because he knows that she's reported him as well a bunch of these times, and he's still seeing her. They're still having sex.
Yeah.
A lot of the reports said ex-girlfriend, but she adamantly denies that they were not.
Well, she would now, definitely.
Well, yeah, but she was a sex worker essentially, and I guess he was just a client. But she was a big fan of the band, so maybe there is some grey area there.
Yeah, I think it kind of links back to the other Ian that we covered, Huntley, and control is a big thing for Watkins. Obviously, he's had a taste of fame and celebrity for the first time in his life, and it's a huge amount for a guy from the Welsh valleys that no one else has ever heard of.
Yeah,
and all of a sudden he's got fans that are literally obsessed with him. You know, posters on the wall, writing to him. But there are people that are literally he refers to them as mega fans.
Yeah.
That are developing, and there's a horde of them. There's so many people obsessed with the guy.
On April 3rd, 2012, a video filmed one day after Lostprophets' album Weapons was released showed Watkins performing a sex act on a baby, which, is absolutely horrifying. So this was filmed only hours after Watkins appeared on BBC Radio 1. Again, that was where one of his ex-girlfriends, Fern Cotton, worked, and another video emerged where he was watching a woman abuse a child, and he called them his slave duo.
In another, he was filmed taking part in sex acts with a girl, a fan from Boston, Massachusetts, describing her as my underaged slut. Videos of Watkins having sex with another fan was created as early as October 2008, according to BBC News. So on October 21st, 2012, nearly 4 years after concerns were first raised around Watkins's predatory behaviour, Watkins is arrested for possession of illegal drugs, and as well as this, his laptop is seized. Watkins is then released on bail and returns to join his band on their UK tour.
Yeah, and there's footage of him playing some gigs, after all the things, he's still out there, he's still got people in the crowd are looking up to him and worshipping him, and it's all very, very, you would have thought there'd be some kind of implication, meaning he can't do those things, he can't be performing at gigs.
Yeah.
It's just,
but again, I guess he's gone back to his bandmates and said, all right, lads, I've just been done for having a bit of weed in my pocket or whatever.
One of the bandmates said, actually, he spent the longest time trying to convince us that somebody was trying to get revenge on him because he had lots of women around him. He was trying to claim that girls were trying to get revenge because he wasn't with them anymore, and they're spreading all these rumours.
So that links nicely to, obviously, all the accusations and reports that Magellic's.
Well, it's because you don't want to believe it. So if you were a band member, you're like, that makes much more sense than you actually doing these things. I mean, you would have thought that's a very sinister way for someone to try and get revenge on you. But
well, I guess the last thing they had on their minds was what actually.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
They've shared all this success. They've been on the road together. You form a bit of a brotherhood with these people.
Definitely.
And the last thing in their minds would have been what was actually going on.
November 14th, 2012, Lostprophets conclude their Weapons tour with a gig in Newport, which isn't too far from their hometown, and this is the last time Ian Watkins is ever seen on stage with the Lostprophets.
December 19th, 2012, Watkins is arrested and charged with 13 sex offences against children, including the attempted rape of a girl aged 1.
It just seemed, this is the case, when you read things about it, it just, you think you can't get any darker, and it just gets darker and darker and darker. So this is nearly a year later, October 1st, 2013. Lostprophets announced the end of the band. According to their Facebook statement, they were all heartbroken, and they had a year to deal with the heartache and come to terms with everything, if that's even possible. But this was the official announcement that the band were no longer. They urged other victims to come forward and speak to the police, get as much out there as possible. They also underlined how much they knew nothing about this. This was very much a surprise to them. And yeah, it must have been, like with the monologue, it must have been an absolutely crazy time.
Agony, yeah. I mean, that's 15 years of their life that is gone. That's got to be unbelievable to even comprehend, yet alone process. Lostprophets tour manager George Davison released a statement on his own Facebook, although his post is slightly more personal and emotional, but it does take into account the victims and their family members, the other band members, and the fans. He's quoted as saying, "The fans will move on, taking down their posters, throwing out their LP albums, and looking for the next rock savior to admire."
Yeah, and I think that's the underlines our point about the band members. I mean, they've spent so long pursuing this, and they're known, they're on people's walls, and this, which they had no control over. I know some people might think they must have known something, but they were saying, like, for like 7 months of the year, Ian was living back in Wales and they were in LA, so they didn't actually see him for most of the year, and they just thought he was into his drugs. He was
he's well known as a family man, did a lot for his mum. Obviously she had kidney issues, so I mean Lostprophets because of Ian actually did a load of gigs for Kidney Foundation Wales.
Yeah, there's lots of pictures of him visiting wards with kids.
So on November 26th, 2013, after initially denying the charges, Watkins changes his plea and pleads guilty. He pleads guilty to attempted rape of 2 babies of 2 different fans. Miss Majelix tells the jury that she repeatedly went to the police as well as Watkins' family about his paedophile activities, but was not believed until 2012 when he was actually arrested.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen lots of interviews with Miss Majelix, and she was very adamant the whole time, and she was very active. And at one stage, she was even just felt like she couldn't take it any further. She's taken it to every avenue she possibly could, and she wasn't believed. So you don't really blame her for kind of at some stages kind of questioning this whole thing. But she kind of had a day in court where she was able to say, "See, this is exactly what I was talking about."
Yeah, I mean, she seems highly emotional, but at the same time, it's warranted. But she also just seems kind of bewildered that no one's believing her at this point, or had believed her up to this point.
Yeah, because years ago, if she was listened to, then how many lives would have been,
changed?
Because we don't know the extent of how far this went back, how many fans. Because I mean, obviously, there are thousands and thousands of fans all over the world, and he's very manipulative. And you just think that there's more than likely a lot of people out there which have been affected by this, which we don't know about.
Mm-hmm. So, on December 18th, 2013, Watkins is sentenced to 35 years in prison for child sex offences. Further charges included taking and possessing indecent images of children, and 1 charge of possessing an extreme pornographic image involving a sex act on an animal, according to BBC News. There are 2 co-defendants in this case, one known as Person A and one known as Person B for legal reasons. One is aged 21 from Yorkshire and the other 24 from Bedfordshire. These are the mothers of the children that he abused. They also received jail terms of 14 years and 17 years respectively. BBC News would then go on to report that police departments of South Yorkshire, Bedfordshire and South Wales were extensively investigated about the information they allegedly received before Watkins was arrested in December 2012. The British organisation National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children has called Watkins a highly manipulative and devious sex offender. Des Mannion, head of NSPCC for Wales, said Watkins used his status and fame to manipulate people and to abuse their children.
Which sounds very similar to the Jimmy Savile lines used, On January 24th, 2014, Watkins is transferred from HM Prison Park, where he had been incarcerated while on remand, to HM Prison Wakefield, which actually isn't very far away from here.
No. 10 miles. Thanks for reminding me.
To begin serving his sentence. In order to be closer to his mother after she had a kidney transplant, he was transferred to HM Prison Long Lartin on 25th of January 2014. On 9th of October 2017, Watkins was accused of grooming a young mother from prison. As of March 2018, he was back at HMP Wakefield.
So Watkins, yes, so he's been through multiple prison systems there and has wound up back in HMP Wakefield, which is kind of notorious for housing various infamous sex offenders throughout the country.
Yeah, I mean, because in prisons it's quite widely known that, sex offenders are targeted, and obviously, as we mentioned before with Ian Huntley, it's going to do your reputation a world of good if you're the one that gets them.
Yeah, and specifically the information that was released about what Watkins did and what he planned to do.
Well, I can't imagine that he's walking about freely with other inmates. He's going to be very secluded and very on his own.
Absolutely, which is a world apart from the world he was used to.
So not too long ago, March 11th, 2018, Watkins was found with a mobile phone that he'd been hiding in his anus. Watkins pleaded not guilty to this case, claiming that other inmates were forcing him, threatening him, and even trying to extort him, and they forced him to hide the phone. But the courts found him guilty of this, and they added another 10 months onto his sentence.
I can only hope that this was one of those, what's that show called? Dom Jolly.
Oh, it is Trigger Happy TV.
Yes, I can only hope that that is the mobile phone that's been referenced.
Yeah, no, I'm just getting a skinny cappuccino latte.
Yeah, just a classic 80s phone.
Yeah,
that's big enough. I mean,
corded or cordless, we don't mind.
The butt is actually referred to in prison as the prison pocket.
There you go.
So,
well, Watkins is his pocket is being used. Let's say.
Yes.
Okay. So Watkins now arrested. Now in prison. We're going to now explore the kind of immediate and ongoing aftermath. Okay, so the laptop that we spoke about that was seized when Watkins was arrested for possession of illegal drugs was found to have been heavily encrypted, and it's alleged that kids was in block capitals the password.
I mean, this shows the complete arrogance of the guy and the fact that he just thought this was all a game. And yeah, it's just lots of layers to his kind of very, very dark humour. And Watkins had photos of children, 24 of them fall into the most serious level under British law. As I mentioned before, I've got a mate of mine who works for the police, and he actually used to have the job role of categorising child pornography. So he'd get hard drives, have to sit there and literally go through every image, every video, and classify what exactly that falls under. And I quite maybe naively asked him, surely if you have 6 top tier, that's enough for you to say they're going to get this much time in prison. And he said the reason why they have to go through each and every image is because if they can see a school bag or see anything that could tell you who the girl is, and they can find her, that's what they're looking for in these images as well, classifying it, but also trying to find the victim and trying to get them out of that situation, which I never...
Yeah, of course.
Never thought of it like that.
Well, I mean, in Watkins' case, this is even more disgusting then because some of them were...
Yeah.
Newborns.
Yeah. And the other thing he was saying as well with this is he also had to kind of meet with sex offenders and do the checks, constant checking up on them. And he said if Watkins ever does get out, that he'll be very much strictly observed and have to get unannounced meetings, and people would always be kind of keeping an eye on him.
Relocated, new identity.
I imagine he must have to.
Yeah.
I mean, from Maxine Carr, who allegedly was proven not to know about the murders and whatnot, that with this case, you'd have to.
Mm-hmm. Well, Watkins is currently 43 years old. He was 35 at the time of his arrest, so he still currently has 27 years to go, to include that kind of extra 10 months they gave for the old mobile phone up the arse.
Yeah, so 70 years old he'd be when he got out.
Yeah.
So
do you reckon he's still going to be kind of that vain-looking? He looks very menacing in that mugshot, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, you always disagree about the visual things, but it's anyone who's got done for any of these things is going to look like an absolute creepy bastard.
But he's kind of got a bit of a pout going on, looking straight down at the camera. So again, just on that, Watkins is not eligible for parole until at least 2036. So another 16 years to go before he can even start looking at that. In any case, I guess the amount of danger he would be to himself in public again means that there's no possible exploration of early release. So the judge, Justice John Royce, said that the case plunged into new depths of depravity. A senior investigating officer of the case described Watkins as a committed, organised paedophile and potentially the most dangerous sex offender the UK has ever seen.
You have to think about the layers to this. He's approached people who are fans of his band. They obviously worship him. But it's over time, that he's managed to get them on side. A lot of these cases, it says he's ploughing them with drugs, the kids with drugs, which is, there's something very...
Babies with drugs, yeah.
Yeah, and he was basically... So you think maybe, was he the supplier of these drugs and they were hooked on it and he was the only way they were going to get it and it was the way it is? There's lots of questions here because you can't just assume a parent's going to willingly give over their child.
Yeah.
There's no form of this ever, any way of this being seen as, although well, that makes sense because it doesn't at all. But there must be layers to it.
So yes, Watkins had no previous criminal cautions or convictions, any kind of record whatsoever in his life. Like we said, he was well raised, well educated, had a good reputation of being a family man and a good person. But perhaps the idea of being able to have any woman that you can in the whole world is something that potentially numbed him after a while. And they say that when you get at a point where there's no risk involved or no kind of apprehension involved, that's when you can begin to explore other avenues for excitement.
Well, I guess it's kind of like, again, this is not making any excuses for him. We're just trying to think into his psyche here. He goes from cocaine to ecstasy to crystal meth, so he went very deep and dark there. And then with women, he had his pick. Then he went a lot younger, 16 and younger, and then younger and younger. And then there's mentions of animal porn and whatnot. And it just kind of felt like he just wanted to get push the boundaries. There's literally no excuse for anything.
The phrase megalols, Tom, became quite synonymous with the band. This originated when a band member saw the phrase used on a punktastic.com forum, and it took off from there. They used it as kind of an in-word, on tour. But Watkins takes this to a new level and actually launches a kind of branded merchandise and T-shirts that he's, as a graphic designer with the background he has. So he kind of prints it. He actually went as far as to compare himself to Banksy.
Yeah, that's absolutely absurd. And
the arrogance of this guy.
The fact that we've already gone into his past with other things. His clothing company was Made in Hell Clothing, which
very apt.
Very, very apt indeed. He very much believed his own hype. Did Watkins, the band would play gigs with big signs of megalols behind them on their backdrops. And the thing is as well, they're quite old at this point. So using megalols is just weird anyway.
Yeah, and he's overheard, or it's recorded on one of his phone calls the day after he was arrested, talking to a female friend that he was just going to put a statement out to say, nobody got hurt, I didn't harm anybody, it was just megalols. It's worse than Richard Keys.
The way he delivered it.
It was just banter.
It was just megalols.
It was just banter.
Lostprophets also had a fan site, megalols.com, which has since obviously been shut down.
Watkins still has a Twitter going on. He has 30,000 followers. His Twitter bio was the proprietor of propaganda, the tsunami of swagger, the sultan of swing, don't believe a thing.
He is still followed by Variety magazine as well as Kerrang Radio.
Which I imagine is they've just not
clicked.
Yeah, but still, it's you would have thought, get rid of him from my follow list. And some of the comments, people are still defending him, innocent until proven guilty. And it's like, well, then there's Facebook groups and stuff like that, people thinking that he's innocent. It's just absolutely absurd. There's always going to be people who love the band and they can't deny, they can't say, oh, my childhood was full of me listening to a song of a monster. They want to believe in him. But I couldn't find any big conspiracy ideas behind it. It's
pretty cut and dry.
The fact he's admitted he's guilty, it's like, what else do you need?
Well, it took him a year to change his mind to go, actually, you know what?
True. And as well, to be honest, prison is the safest place for him. Because, as we said, people of that not going to say persuasion, people like him, obviously, they're rightfully public enemy number one, and people will obviously
tear him apart.
Yes, I mean, prisons actually is the safest part for him.
Another interesting note is that before his arrest, Watkins had a net worth of an estimated $500,000 built up through royalties. In one interview I found from Watkins with Kerrang magazine, he kind of subtly brags that they need to be on tour all the time because they make £5,000 per night from merchandise alone. And again, he's kind of trying to claim responsibility. He's got the Megalols brand out there. He's got Made in Hell.
That's not actually, like, I'm a videographer. I've filmed on tours of bands before, and a band who are not anywhere near known as Lostprophets were making £1,000 a night. Mm-hmm. So it's not.
And this is, a band that were doing arena tours.
Exactly, yeah. So it's not actually. Sorry, Ian, it's not actually a lot.
He's also, he was due to receive in 2015 £150,000 as part of money owed to Lostprophets for performances. But thankfully that money was lost, and the touring company that Watkins actually was a director of, it was called Goonies Touring Company, went into liquidation, and they actually had to use that money rather than going into Ian's pocket to pay off debtors.
So the Lostprophets band members, obviously they've had time to deal with this and think about it, and yeah, they've obviously all denied any knowledge. They've actually gone as far as saying they would have killed Watkins on the spot if they knew about this, and they mentioned the fact that he's put 15 years of their lives down the toilet, which you can't help but sympathise for the band members. I mean, the bassist actually, in one of the last Warped tours, he recalls when Watkins was very much on drugs, he didn't turn up for one of the gigs, and they found him, and one of the other members had to do all the vocals, and they went in the bus, and Watkins was just sitting there, and he beat the living crap out of him. And I think now he looks back on that moment as a fond moment, rather than a moment of regret. Well, obviously, it wasn't anything to do with this, but I'm sure that would be actually, And a lot of them say like, I would want to know why, and then they're like, but they know that wouldn't help them. If he answered the questions, it's not going to make them feel better. And so they just want to wash their hands on him. Yeah,
well, I mean, they'd all hoped that it was a mistake, from his arrest and that year until he was convicted. They still they didn't necessarily back his corner, but they distanced slightly, but they still were hoping it was some form of mistake.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, like you can't believe that it's true.
Yeah.
It's not really an option. You can't believe it because, your world will crash around, and also you think about all the victims and you're like, I can't have spent 15 years with this guy. I can't have grown up with him, called him a friend. You question everything. Like after that, you must lose trust in anyone and anything. So I mean,
well, you can't recover from that. And bassist Stuart Richardson. Now I don't know if this was the guy that smacked him up on the bus. Brilliant, good old Stuart. He said, even though I was completely done with him, I did still hope it was all a mistake, that he was innocent. He had to be. However, the first time we knew the truth, we knew that the band was done. You cannot go back from that.
I mean, we're talking about the band, but obviously his family, his immediate family, his younger brother was quoted saying the fact that, as a kid, saying, oh, my brother's Ian Watkins, it was always seen as a cool thing, as a way of showing off. And now he says, I don't tell anyone. I'm very much ashamed to be the brother of Ian Watkins. His mum, which harder position, you're not always gonna back your kid, but you can't. She said publicly she wouldn't disown him. And the stepdad said you'd love to knock him around the prison and teach him a lesson. But they're both kind of saying, you can't disown blood, but
it's crazy, isn't it?
It's just a heartbreaking situation. I mean, it ruined the band, it ruined the family, it ruined hundreds of people's lives, obviously.
I mean, it's crazy what fame will do to people. I mean, a very off tangent here, but Wings of Redemption, my favourite YouTuber ever. Obviously, fame just turned him a little bit sour and he became, a little bit short with people.
I mean, we thought Kenny was a niche reference.
Yeah, whatever. I hope your family dies in an automobile wreck.
Yeah.
Wings of Redemption, that's a YouTube rabbit hole, which
I enjoyed it very much. Compared to this rabbit hole with, researching Watkins, and on that actually, God, in researching this case, there were obviously hundreds of awful stories that are read, transcripts that are read, but I found a video of Lostprophets doing a Christmas video for Pop World, and it's still on YouTube, during which he dresses up as Santa, has children sit on his knee and kisses the forehead of a baby.
It's quite reminiscent of when you see that video of Gary Glitter and Jimmy Savile and they're sitting in the audience with arms around young girls. It's also the music video that the Lostprophets did for Town called Hypocrisy. That video also very, very disturbing once you know all the truth about Ian Watkins. So
they say 90% of Lostprophets' music catalogue has been destroyed by obviously what Watkins did. However, interestingly, I did have a look. They are back now on Spotify. They had been removed for a period of time. You can also buy their music off of iTunes. It's 99p per song. So where that money is going...
big to the band members and the record label when we're going to Ian Watkins. The thing is, it's like, this is an interesting topic because it is like these band members have worked their ass off for all this. And it's like, it's just luck of the draw, I guess. I mean, they had a band member who was one of the most evil human beings on earth, so therefore... yeah, it's very problematic having his music anywhere. The thought of people listening and enjoying it is horrible. But then you go back and you think Michael Jackson's music being readily available. Yeah. Obviously, there's two camps there. People that believe that he is innocent or not, and people who, Gary Glitter's music being used in The Joker.
That was highly controversial at the time.
Yeah, it kind of like there's a lot of, R. Kelly. Obviously, he's been taken off Spotify and whatnot. Which then
got his own Netflix series.
Well, I mean, it's not I'm sure he doesn't love it.
In a roundabout way.
But then you think, if R. Kelly's off there, why isn't Lostprophets off there?
Yeah. No, I think that's fair.
Going back to the Spotify, they still have 105,000 monthly listeners.
Yeah.
Which I find very peculiar.
Another thing, interestingly of note, there were a couple other Ian Watkins at the time of the arrest and the conviction that got kind of caught and scapegoated in the kind of
crosshairs.
The crosshairs, yeah. So there were Twitter mobs and Facebook mobs attacking Ian H. Watkins, more commonly known as H, of Steps fame.
Yeah, which I think some people found quite amusing, but the fact, he had obviously nothing to do with any of this. He was just an innocent pop star.
I think the people that found it funny were more based, and I'm not saying I'm one of these people that found it funny, but he was just very animated in how much distance he was trying to put from it, that it was...
of course.
But of course you would be.
Yeah, so I think, he was always pleading his innocence, and there's another mild-mannered Christian who dedicated his life to helping victims of people trafficking, which is also getting abused. I mean, it's quite reminiscent to the John Lewis Twitter account, isn't it, really? But I'm sure John Lewis wouldn't like these kind of tweets going his way. He wouldn't be able to do as many pithy little replies.
Yeah. This poor little Christian guy, mild-mannered Christian is all we know about him, but he unfortunately had the Twitter handle of @Ian Watkins. If he was probably the first person to go for.
If I had people talking about me and all they knew was mild-mannered Christian, I'd be quite bored with that.
Yeah. So at sentencing, the court heard that following his plea on November 27th, 2013, Watkins telephoned a female friend from Park Prison in Bridgend, and it is reported that he said, "I'm going to put a statement out on the 18th just to say it was mega lols. I don't know what everyone is getting so freaked out about." He also claimed the day after admitting he was a paedophile during the court hearing, it was like, either me go up there and say, "Come on, it wasn't that bad, nobody got hurt, do my charm," or do I end up just making things worse for myself, or do I just say I was off my head and can't remember?
Yeah, I remember what I think was the lawyers, his defence lawyers, which you kind of think how he could have that job, but they said something along the lines of he didn't remember any of this. That was one of the defences. He filmed these things, and the only way he knew he'd done these things was by looking at the visuals. He was so drugged up that he couldn't possibly do these things unless he was drugged up, which didn't really wash with the jury.
Watkins' victims obviously included baby boy, baby girl, children, young teenagers. He would often communicate with the mothers of the victims while he was on tour and couldn't physically get to them, which is eerie. But he sent one message to a mother of one of his victims that said, "If you belong to me, so does your baby."
I mean, Joanne Majelic, she was taken into court because people, she had child porn because she had the porn there because she was trying to get Ian Watkins convicted, and she showed the police about it, but they actually tried to get her on having child porn. The reason why she was quite polarising character was basically because there's recordings of them having sex. There's recordings of her saying some outrageous things, things that he asked her to say, which obviously involved children. But she said all along that she was doing this to just prove what the guy he was. And the fact that she went to the police with it obviously shows that that's what she was doing.
Yeah.
I mean, I personally think she's quite the unsung hero here. And she
has a moral compass.
Definitely. And I mean, it sounds quite... she was still engaging with sex with him, but she brought him down. But she says, like, she still gets hate. She still gets, like, death threats, and people, they found her, like, relatives' addresses, and they bombard them with, like, just hate mail. And it's just like,
without her, I mean, would he have carried on? Would he have been caught?
I mean, it took long enough for her, with her banging on the door, for them to ignore them the whole time. But so I just think, like, she should not be forgotten in this, because she played a massive part.
In preparing for the episode, there's kind of a transcript of text messages that he would send and receive from fans. And one fan who was had newly become a new parent, I guess that's the phrase I'll use, new parent, had text asking if it would be at all possible to meet Ian after they played a show in her local town. And he said, only if you bring your baby, and only if I can it.
I mean, the fact that he's sending these things so freely and arrogantly, and, like, the fact that he doesn't even think that this is going to come back, it's just absolutely absurd. I mean, one of the things apparently with grooming is, like, especially with the younger people, which a lot of them were younger fans who grew up loving him and then were old enough to have kids, you basically send some, just thanks for coming to the show, and then you build up. You send something a bit provocative, and then you feel like you've built a bit of trust with them because you sent something like that. Therefore, they should send something back, and it just builds and builds and builds. I mean, it's hard to put yourself in that position and think how that could possibly happen, but it happened to so many people that he obviously just knew how to manipulate and take advantage of vulnerable people as well.
They had an extensive touring schedule. They were in the studio a lot, in LA all the time. So whenever Watkins couldn't physically get to these parents, and I mean that in itself is a horrible thought, he would make the parents Skype him and abuse the children on the Skype session with him. And finally, obviously, Watkins, as you saw with Phil's fantastic animation, he's gone from the frontman of a band that are, taking over the world and possibly would still be going today. And he's had a gradual decline in his appearance, but he still seems to almost embrace vanity in that mugshot. I can't really take a pop at him because another one, same as Cass, a decent looking guy. I'd probably say he had slightly ratty features, but I can't really talk because I look like Roddy from Flushed Away.
I've never seen it.
It's kind of a kind compliment. At the same time, he is a rat.
So a lot of the audience kind of seen with the other kind of cases, we've kind of seemed to have stumbled into a weird pattern of comparing killers to ocean life and things like that. And with Watkins, we're not going to force it on him. It's like, we don't like any of the killers, obviously, but it just felt like an episode where we were not, he didn't feel right to be light about certain aspects of it. It just didn't feel appropriate.
The bloke is a maggot. Fish food, can of worms, maggot.
Yes, I think that's right.
Let's hope justice is served. Let's hope he's never let out.
So that was Ian Watkins from Stage to Cage.
It's got to be, I mean, we've been, fascinated by true crime for many, many, many years. And preparing for this episode was the worst thing I've ever read. Ever, comfortably.
I mean, like you said early on, serial killers would turn their nose up at this behaviour. And even, like you said, from the phone calls and transcript of him being on the phone, he thinks it's not that bad, no one got hurt. I mean, not only obviously the physical things that would harm the children that he did, but also the mental side effects that these children are going to grow up with these hanging over them. So yeah, I mean, that's the case done. I'm glad
see the back of that.
Yeah, we're not going to have to touch that again.
There's a different name coming next week, obviously with it being a new episode. Different theme, different country. I would say probably the most renowned case that we've covered so far. So we're quite excited there. This is one of what I would say probably the top 10 biggest names in global serial killer phenomena. But as always, thank you so much for sticking with us. We appreciate that this was
heavy. It was very heavy. Thanks for watching. If you want to give us a like, if you enjoyed it, comment, subscribe, maybe hit the bell for alerts when we're posting. And if you want more content, Patreon, we're going to be uploading more videos onto there. There's extra content with us discussing certain things. And if you are listening to audio, just a little reminder again, if you could subscribe, leave a little review, it does really help us and we'd really appreciate that.
If you have Instagram, guys, please feel free to check us out over at Could Murder a Pod. We post images and videos. There's at least one thing every day coming from there. Not too much, not overwhelming amounts, but
and it's lots of trivia. It's things that we find interesting, which obviously as fellow true crime enthusiasts, we're sure you will find interesting too. Yeah. And our Twitter's going to kick up a gear soon. I've been told. So
it better do.
And we love to hear your opinions. We love to hear you watching with pictures of you enjoying the content. We really do appreciate that.
Yeah, and I know for the audio guys again that it's harder to kind of engage it with comments. I know you can leave reviews, but you can't really leave comments anywhere. So if you want to drop on over at the YouTube channel, drop a comment there. We'd love to say hey.
So thank you very much for listening and watching, and we'll be back next week with a new case.
Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your loved ones. If this is a tricky case to share, and I appreciate that, we've got four other ones that you could show them and just say, don't watch episode 5, or watch it and just turn it.
Thank you for watching. We'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.